check out this piece of 100-year-old barnwood. It's really cool, although it's not exactly flat or square, and I'm unable to do anything with this until I get it milled and properly squared on all four sides. Now, squaring up a piece of lumber is something that a lot of people can overcomplicate and over-explain. It's not really that difficult. It does take some expensive machinery, like this joiner, planer, and a table saw. And if you get nice ones, all of that can total to over $10,000. You don't need the nicest equipment around, but you do need proper equipment to square this board up. So the first step in milling any piece of wood is over here at the joiner, and that's where we're going to go ahead and get started. So out of these three machines that we're going to be using today, the joiner is the one where we're probably going to have the most questions. All right, so we're going to take this slow, one little step at a time, take a deep breath, and we'll just kind of address those questions as we go. So first, the first step in using the joiner is to get a flat face. Now, that face rests on the bed of your joiner, and we push it through. Now, the first question that comes to mind is, well, which face? There's two faces here. How could I possibly decide which face needs to be down? Well, let me bring you in closer, and I'll show you how I'm going to decide on this piece of wood. All right, so let's make this quick and simple. So you see how this board is cupped? I'm going to draw a line just to show you which way it's cupping, so you can kind of better identify this. But you see how this bottom edge is cupped? I'm not going to ride this side through the joiner with this side facing down, because when I push that through, it's got a tendency to want to wobble like this. I'd rather flip it over on this side. It's still got a little minor twist in it, but it's a little more subtle. And I can kind of get more even pressure, and I'm going to keep pressure right here and push it through. So basically, the more rounded, cupped edge, I like to keep that facing up, and where it's more cupped, where the sides are coming in more contact with the table, I like to keep that down. Now that we know which face we want to flatten, next thing we need to take a look at is our depth of cut, how much material we're going to remove in a single pass. And to do that, we're just going to make a little adjustment down here. Now, every joiner is a little different. My joiner in particular is a Powermatic 8-inch helical joiner. The model number is 60HH. Here's my depth of cut gauge. And right now it's set to take a 1/16 of an inch off per pass. And I don't like to go over that number, especially when I'm milling the face of a piece of lumber. If I'm doing the edge, then I will, and I'm like wanting to be super aggressive with it, I'll loosen this and bump that down. I mean, I can take that, probably all the way up to close to 1/4. I don't like to. I would probably even call this an aggressive cut, a little over 1/8. But for me, I like to leave my depth of cut right there at about a 1/16 of an inch. All right, we're almost ready to cut. First, let's just go over some fundamentals of these little push guards, where to place these for when we push through the joiner. All right, so I got 2 of them in my hand, and this is going to take a couple passes to get this nice and flat. So you see how this has some wobble to it. So every time we make a pass on this board, we want to make sure that the placement of our paddles remains consistent after each pass. For example, I don't want to make my first pass applying pressure here on the left side, get it done, and then the second pass, move my pressure to over here. Because you see how I'm no longer pushing down to eliminate that twist anymore? I'm pushing over here. So the first thing is remaining consistent with the placement of your paddles. Next thing that we need to go over in terms of pushing this thing through the joiner is placement of our paddles after we pass the cutter head. Okay? So when I go through, I'm going to keep constant pressure through here. And then once I get past the cutter head, I'm only really putting pressure on this front paddle. I'm not putting it back here at the rear, because this table is actually pretty much perfectly in line with the cutter head, and then this front table is a little lower. It's just how a joiner works, okay? So once I get past the cutter head, I keep the pressure here, and there's not much pressure going on back here at all. And this especially applies for longer boards too, because then you're doing a lot of this overlapping motion with your hands. So my rule of thumb that I do is once I get it through the cutter head and I have enough room to place my second paddle without it coming in contact with the cutter head, that's when I place that on. And so if we have a longer board, once I keep pushing that through, I move my other paddle and I come back and I place pressure. I like to keep pressure as close as I can to the cutter head. Just imagine a piece of wood is in between this paddle and the cutter head. That's the best way I can explain it. And then the third thing, this is just a minor note, whenever we are doing any kind of face joining here, don't be worried about the fence at all. This does not matter. This does not matter at all until we move on to squaring up the edge. And that'll be the second step here at the joiner. All right, so now we're finally ready to cut. It's not a big deal. It just needs a little bit of explaining, you know? All right, so I'm gonna kick on the dust collection and then just pay attention. Follow follow where I'm keeping my hands as I'm pushing this through. Kick this on. All right, now I'm gonna keep the same pressure through here. Watch my hand placement. Pressure here. Now pressure on both hands. Boom, we're through. Okay, that's what it looks like, one pass. We'll go to the next pass, same hand positioning. It's pretty good. I would be able to move on to the edge at this point, but we're going to do one more pass. As you can see, that face that once was wonky and twisted is now nice and flat. When we set it down on a flat surface, which is our joiner, there is no rocking, there's no cupping, there's no twisting. She's a beaut, Clark. The next thing that we need to do is get one of the edges nice and flat and square to this face that we just made. And to do that, now we're going to reference the fence. The fence comes into play now. So we're going to press it up against the fence and push it through. But we kind of run into the same debacle. Which edge do I decide goes on the table? It's not that hard. It's pretty much the same concept as the face. I'll bring you in, I'll show you. Now this board in particular, it's not really bowed out one way or the other too much. So it kind of makes this board pretty simple. And I'd say 80% of the boards that you do, you could really get away with either edge. But there are certain times where one edge is more obvious than the other. It's the same thing. It's this cupped look, okay? So imagine this side is the top of that crown or that cup. If we had it on this side and we're pushing it through, it looks like a banana. It's going to want to go up or down, okay? And so it would be more beneficial to have this side down. I hope that clears it up. This isn't a really good example for the board, but I hope the drawing at least helps. When I'm joining the edge of a board, however, I don't use the push guards. They're not as helpful. They feel like maybe a little more dangerous than just doing it by hand. So I like to do this just with my bare hands, and what I'm doing is I'm keeping the board pressed flat against the fence and then pushing down. And as I go through the cutter head, same thing as when we did the face, I keep pressure after I pass the cutter head. Now I'm not going to show you how to square up a joiner fence. It's pretty easy. Grab a square, ensure your fence is nice and square to your table. And that's all that goes into it. Let's not nuke this. Let's just get her done. And we'll have one edge that's square to our face. It'll be nice and cleaned up. All right, here we go. Keeping this pressed against the fence. So I'm pushing here with my left hand towards the fence, and then I'm pushing down with this hand. All right, because after one pass, second pass. I think that's all good. All right, so at this point, we are halfway through the milling process. We're done with the joiner. We're about to move on to the planer. But before I like to move on to the planer, I like to go ahead and check that my edge is indeed square to the face. Because if it's not, then this whole process kind of needs to be started over again. And so after verifying at the back, the middle, and the front that it is square, we can go ahead and head over to the planer. Okay, so now over at the planer, this machine is a lot less complicated than the joiner. You can't mess this up. You shouldn't, all right? We're gonna make it simple. That side, that face that you just jointed over at the joiner, that is gonna sit flat on your bed, and you're literally just gonna push it in, and it'll feed from the in-feed to the out-feed table. The only adjustment we need to make is to raise this bed up to take a proper amount of material off for the first pass. I'll bring in and show you what my machine looks like. All right, so I'm gonna raise this bed up. I'm not gonna use any kind of measurements or nothing. If you're going for a desired thickness, there is a little gauge over here on the planer, but for the initial pass, it's really not all that important. So I'm gonna bring that up until it's, an 1/8 inch, 1/16 of an inch below this little guard, and that's good enough for me. If I push it in, it kind of catches on these this little safety feature to where I can't pull it back out. I'm gonna raise that up so I can pull it out, but I just wanted to show you that. And so now I'm good. I can turn on the machine, and I'm just gonna push this piece of wood through. All right, so here's what she looks like before. We got our jointed face facing down. Kick her on, and just push her through. See? I had the blade set too high. I didn't even start to make a cut, but that's okay. Rotate it, lower it down. She's eating wood. Nice. What a beaut. All right. So here's after the first pass. Clearly, we still need a little more. So we're going to lower this just a little more. Send her through. We still need a little bit more if we want to use this whole board. Send her through again. All right, that's it. Okay. Now this face is perfectly coplanar to this face. And we can go ahead and verify that by using our square once again. It's nice and square to that edge. And so this is technically S3S right now. Surfaced, 3 sides. But we got one more edge left to clean up, and we can accomplish this over at the table saw. So let's head over there. Now I know one of you guys in the comments are gonna be like, oh my God, you weren't using like safety glasses and hearing protection, and you weren't wrapped in bubble wrap, and that was unsafe. Well, here's for you guys on the last step over at the table saw. We're going to be over here to square up this this fourth edge, so let's get this rolling. All right, so this is pretty self-explanatory. If you've gotten this far, well, you're probably a woodworker. You probably know how to cut wood on a table saw. Set the blade higher than your workpiece, and we're gonna set our fence over here to cut off our desired amount of wood. Oh, I'll even, here, please the safety police a little more. We're gonna use a push stick. All right. So we're just gonna cut this edge off, and then we got a perfectly square board. It's that easy. It is that easy to square up lumber. It's not hard. Oh my God, so safe. That was so safe. Yay. We're done. Woo! She's square. All right, y'all. That is how you square up some lumber. All right, those are good fundamentals. I think if you took anything away from this video, it was probably tips about the joiner. That was good. But yeah, we can verify this is all square. She looks good. She looks good. I like it. So, squaring up lumber is a it's a fundamental of woodworking. You have to be able to do this to build any project successfully, okay? I hope you enjoyed the tips I shared. That is exactly the process that I go about every time I'm milling up lumber. I don't really do it anything differently. So if you have any tips or insight that's actually helpful, go ahead and leave it down in the comments, and let us all be enlightened by your wisdom. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one.